Careful what you ask for, Kings. Careful what you ask for. Y'all wanted to turn up and make this a competitive game late, and you got that all too familiar bitter taste of defeat at the hands of Steph Curry. Step back, 28-footer to win the game at Chase last night in a game where Sacramento, was kind of in control for most of the game. 22 Warrior turnovers. And what was it, like a 14-point lead in the fourth quarter? And then Mike Brown, he wanted to challenge things. And I get it. The Kings, they're trying to get ready for the season. They haven't exactly had a cohesive preseason, but it kind of turned the Warriors up. And Kerr, Steph, and CP were like, all right, bet, yeah, okay, we can do this. We competitors. Where to start? I think we need to start with Trayce Jackson-Davis getting his first NBA start. Kevon, they said, was under the weather, resting, whatever you want to say. He'll be ready, And so he matches up against Sabonis in our first round opponent of last year, who was very thirsty to stick it to us in that first matchup, right? Because all summer he had to hear about Looney eating his lunch, right? And you assumed, okay, there's a rookie on Sabonis. We're just going to pick on him immediately. And I think that was the first surprising thing to me was like, oh, they're not really attacking him, because you saw he could physically hold his own against Sabonis, who just tries to plow through you, right? There's no real moves. By the way, why were they reffing Sabonis like he's Jokic? Like, listen, if you're going to initiate that much contact, you can't get touch calls as well, right? I don't know what that is, but yeah. So Trayce gets the start. And I think he more than held his own against Sabonis. I liked what I saw in the pick and roll, quick hands, kind of playing the cat and mouse game, and then you saw the verticality. Now, the refereeing, I don't like to bring it up, but it was preseason, right? And there were some suspect calls, particularly on our bigs, Trayce Jackson and Dario in the paint. But what was interesting was in the second half, they started putting him in pick and rolls offensively. And you saw him be a vertical spacer. He made a living at Indiana in that dunker spot, and you see how quickly he gets up off the ground and finishes, right? But once you put him in some pick and rolls, and they had fed him a couple times, Clay hit him with the lob, and all of a sudden, Sabonis and these guys are dropping, even giving nail help from the weak side on his rolls, because right away, I think defenses and players around the league are going to identify like, yo, this kid will punch on us. Like he will, that's a high percentage play for them. And so it opened up Steph for a three, and it opened up some other things offensively. And it's just something that the Warriors haven't had a true vertical spacing rim roller since JaVale McGee, who, by the way, looked like JaVale McGee for the Kings. I still feel like that was kind of a missed opportunity. I always root for JaVale, though. Now, some of y'all ain't going to like this, but the truth of the matter is Trayce Jackson in one start has already had a better game than James Wiseman ever has for the Warriors. Like, don't throw numbers at me. Don't throw Wiseman having 25 points in some sort of non-meaningful minutes, right? Like a complete game. Rebounding, pick and roll, being where you should defensively, right? Like that was impressive, man. That's why they went and got him at 23, and why so many of us were excited when they got him. And it's funny, no Looney, no Draymond, but with Sarch out there, Kuminga, and Trayce Jackson, at least last night you looked around, you're like, maybe we ain't that small, right? In the fact that Kuminga, who we're going to talk about next, the fact that Kuminga is hitting the three like he is, that unlocks so much, because now you can play him alongside Looney or Draymond, and you can kind of slide him to the three offensively, which greatly increases our size, right? When Kuminga's the three and you can have the two other bigs in there, now it may not be an issue, man. And so, yeah, Kuminga didn't close the game, but didn't seem too bothered by it, right? And he continued to dominate. The other thing that you noticed was the inside-out attack. There was a lot more post catches, and I think that's one thing Chris Paul is going to really help with this offense is identifying mismatches and attacking them, right? It's not really been a part of this system in the current Steph era, but it's like, hey, this no-name Euro switched on Kuminga, get it to him, right? That's a Chris Paul special, and I think he's going to help identify those matchups quicker, and it's going to benefit not just Kuminga, I think Wiggins. I think Wiggins is going to benefit from this more pick-and-roll centric offense with Chris Paul. Underdog fantasy, basketball season's kicking off. You see the code Alchemy, 100% bonus on your first deposit up to $500. The tip-off special is LeBron James opening night, higher or lower than half a point. So it's really a no-brainer to pair that with your deposit bonus. I'm also starting some fantasy basketball leagues, and you can leave a comment in the pinned comment and join the league. We're going to draft this Sunday. There's no Niner game, right? And what I really like about it is you set your lineup and you leave it. They're just going to take the top points each night. You don't have to adjust your lineup and commit that much. You can just play, have fun, and hopefully win at Underdog Fantasy. Let's talk about Dario Saric, though, for a second here, because low-key, he was maybe the third best player on the floor last night for the Warriors. And I'm not talking about numbers, just overall impact. I think a lot of people were aware of how dynamic he can be offensively, right? He sees the floor, he can dribble, pass, and shoot. You saw him and CP have a good connection already in the pick and roll. He leaves a perfect pocket for CP. Their timing is already there. But what I've been impressed with was not just his competitiveness and alertness defensively, but his IQ. You can tell, what's the saying, KYP, know your personnel around the league. And the Warriors had some issues with that even in this game, believe it or not. He knows the personnel around the league and what they want to do, and he understands angles, right? And he understands that you have to make the offensive player second guess. You can't just show him the same thing all the time. And so when you combine his IQ, his want, and size, I think he's going to hold up relatively well as a defender. I think that was always the question. So very impressed with him and CP's connection. Let's talk about Chris Paul, because we finally, I think, got our first true Chris Paul moment as a Warrior, right? Where I think it started at the end of the third quarter. He drew a cheap one on Fox, irritated him, then drew another cheap one on JaVale McGee. And then it trickled into the fourth quarter. He hit a clutch three, and he was finding who needed the ball, right? There was about 7 minutes where Chris Paul had his fingerprint all over this game, and it was frankly what sparked the comeback, allowed us to climb back in it. Now, did you hear the quote from Steve Kerr? He told Chris, "Hey, we need you to be you. You know, you're almost trying to fit in too much. Sometimes we need you to take 4 mid-rangers in a row," right? Just as an example. And I think what he's also getting at is defenses are playing Chris for the pass right now. When he comes off these pick and rolls and when he probes to the elbow, he's got to keep them honest by taking some of those, right? And that's what I think he was getting at. And here's what you can say: as reluctant as a shooter as he can be, he's clutch, right? Big moments, his entire career, he takes and makes those shots, and he hit a couple clutch ones down the stretch. But maybe most importantly, he got the chef the ball, right? He got the chef the ball. How many fourth quarters have we watched where after the game or as it's happening, you're like, yo, Steph hasn't gotten shots. Like, Steph has 2 shots in the fourth quarter. Like, what's going on? Not on Chris Paul's watch, right? He knew where to go with the ball. And all of a sudden, Steph was in a rhythm and feasting. And Mike Brown's looking up at the scoreboard, and it's 6, it's 4, it's 2. Oh, they're back in the game, right? So seeing the chemistry come together and Chris put his stamp on the game, that was exciting. I will say he's so physical. And some of the tactics he uses to draw fouls and stuff like that, you can see beyond his age why there have been durability issues, right? Because he's just really physical out there. And so it's just in the back of my mind watching him play. Steph, got to give him his flowers. I know sometimes I take Steph for granted, right? It's easy to 30 points and obviously the game winner. Now, I've right now got a 15-minute breakdown of all the plays through the fourth quarter on my Patreon right now. Support me. That's the best way to do it. But what I had said about that play is I love that it was just an ISO on an island. I feel like in the past, the Warriors, particularly in those situations, you know, where it's like a final shot thing, they get too complicated and cute with the play design. It's like, hey, we're going to send a slip screen and then a real screen and then a cut, right? And ultimately what ends up happening is it just brings more defenders to Steph, right? Because they're like, we're not going to let Steph get it. And when you give him space and put him on an island, you're ensuring Steph's going to get the shot that he wants more than likely. And you saw what he got, right? And I think Steph, I think it's pretty clear he's sharper and crisper than he was a year ago. Coming off the championship hangover, right? He's fresher and he's always in shape. That's never a question, but mentally he did some things, throwing it off Herter's leg. There was another broken play where he had a quick pass and you're like, oh, he's really engaged and locked in. At this point in the season, in preseason, that's not always the case. So you can just see a different mindset from Steph moving forward. The turnovers, 22 of them. Look, it's a systemic issue. They're always going to have high turnovers. They've got to eliminate the self-inflicting ones. Ball handling, some of it is still getting familiar with each other. And then defensively, the switching still isn't great, right? And I think that they have to understand, and again, as they gain familiarity, allow the bigger bodies to drop into the paint. The guards have to get out to the perimeter. I don't want to see guards sending Sarch out to the perimeter for the three as they drop. No. Let him stay in the paint, right? I think they got to work that out. But all in all, I mean, I don't know how you can't feel optimistic about the season as far as the depth, the young players, and the chemistry. I haven't been this excited about a Warriors roster in a long time, maybe since KD's arrival, if you want to be honest. Preseason finale Friday against the Spurs. Hopefully we get to see Wembanyama. I'm expecting to see the young guys in that game. Steph and CP, I think Clay maybe too, over 30 minutes in that game as it became like a real game all of a sudden, right? And so you imagine they're going to rest in this finale. And I want to see some Usman Garuba. Podziemski, will he get in there? Corey Joe made his debut. I'll talk about that at another time. But yeah, man, I'm ready for the season. And I think more importantly, the Warriors look ready for the season. Hit that like, share, and subscribe. I'm out, y'all.